Hi guys, and welcome to this instructional video on Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. Today we're going to be deploying Windows 10. So before we begin, you need a couple of things. The main thing you'll need is your Windows 10 ISO or installation DVD. You will also need a custom build user account if you want to follow my steps. Otherwise, you can use your local administrator account of your MDT server. If you're creating a custom build account, you will need to make sure that on your deployment share that the user account has full permission to access the share and has read and execute, list folders and contents, and read. It shouldn't need anything else. I haven't run into it needing anything else at this time, but when we look further later on at dynamic logging, we will need to give the user account more permissions to be able to write data back to the deployment share, or alternatively a logging share, which is what I use. So let's load up Microsoft Deployment Toolkit Workbench and expand out our deployment share. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to import an operating system. Now, I like to keep my stuff organized, so I'm going to create a folder called Windows, if I could spell, Windows 10 Professional, and we're going to click Next, and we're going to click Next, and it's created the folder. We're then going to select folder, we're going to right click, and we're going to select Import Operating System. Now I'm going to use the top option, full set of source files, and I'm going to navigate to my directory. So I'm going to go to Computer, to my E drive, and I'm going to select. I'm then going to select Next. It's then going to pre-populate Windows 10 Professional 64 or Pro 64. Now this is the DVD that I've inserted. If you've inserted an Enterprise version, it'll populate with Enterprise. If you've inserted an Education version of Windows 10, same thing will happen. And we'll just click Next. Now it doesn't take too long for MDT to import, depending on the performance of your server, spec, etc. will depend on how fast this process takes, or how long this process takes. There's not much in the meantime that we can do. It likes you to stay in the wizard, so I'll pause the video until this is done. Okay, for those of you that are watching the time in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, that took less than 2 minutes. So we'll now click Finish. And you can see it's added it into the list here. Now, something that I didn't do at the very start is something that I should have done. To aid us with the deployment process, there's a couple of settings we need to edit. So, for those of you who didn't see my very quick clicking, if you right click on your deployment share, go down to Properties, go down to Rules, you get this screen here. At the very top here, I'm going to add in the following. Skip BDD welcome equals yes. And then I'm going to go down here to the bottom and go edit bootstrap init, which will open this file in Notepad for you. Now automatically it's populated your deployment share here. But to make the process a little bit more automated, to prevent the entering of usernames and passwords, we're going to put a couple of settings in. So the first one we're going to put in is user ID equals build. We're then going to put in user domain equals tpw-mdt. Now this is my local server name. This is the name of my local server. This is not the domain name that this server is part of, because I'm using a local server account. I need to use the local server domain. And then we're going to put user password equals bu1. And I've just noticed that being me, user password b. So that's the password that I've used. This is not a password that I use in production environments. For those of you who are probably thinking it's a little bit silly me showing the password, I'm just showing you what I'm using in this demonstration. Now, I'm using a strong password. I could probably make it stronger again, but for a build account, I strongly recommend a strong password. So I'm going to make sure I save that file. Save. And I'm going to go to exit. Also, because I want to set my language to UK, I'm going to go keyboard local equals en-uk. I'm also going to put in skip user data equals yes. Now, the keyboard local sets my keyboard type to English UK. The skip user data skips the capturing of data section, the user state migration section. For this demonstration, I'm not going to show you how to capture user data and migrate it across. We'll look at that in a different episode. And because I want to be specifying the computer names, I'm going to put in this line, OSD computer name equals. I'm not going to put anything in there. I'm going to leave it like that. Now this is because we will actually enter the computer name in the task sequence when we build the task sequence. When we run the task sequence. Now at this point I could update the deployment share, but I'm not going to until I've actually completed everything I need to do. So I'm now going to create our task sequence. Again, because I like to keep things organised, I'm going to right click on the task sequence folder. I'm then going to select new folder. I'm then going to create a folder called Windows 10 Deploy. And we're going to go next, finish. We're then going to select the Windows 10 folder. We're going to go right click and we're going to select new task sequence. I'm going to call it TPW01. And I'm going to call this Windows 10 Basic Deploy. Okay, so I've just created a basic deployment. I'm going to click Next. I'm then going to select Standard Task Sequence, which is the default option. There are many others, so you can do Assist Prep and Capture, Standard Client Task Sequence, Standard Client Replace Task Sequence, Standard Client Upgrade Class Sequence, Custom Task Sequence, a Light Touch OEM Installation, or Task Sequence, Standard Server Task Sequence, Standard Server Upgrade, Post OS Installation Task Sequence. And then you've got to deploy to VHD and VHD for server. So we're going to stick with our Standard Client Task Sequence. We're going to click Next. We're now going to select our operating system. from the folder list. We'll go click next. Do not specify a product key at this time. I'm not going to specify a product key. In my production environment, we use KMS keys, so the activation is completed when the device joins the domain. In this video, I'm not going to be showing you how to join the device to the domain. I'm just going to be showing you how to do to a work group, but we will join to a domain in another video, so we'll create a separate task sequence to do that. You can specify a product key or a multiple activation key or MAC key, which most enterprises have, and most education environments will also have MAC keys. At this point you can enter it in and it will populate here. That key will then be used to activate Windows. Or you can obviously specify a normal product key at the bottom. So we're going to click next. So we're going to give it computer name. So we're going to call it TPW client. And I'm just going to put TPW. I'm going to leave the web page as about blank. If for corporate reasons you want to set your corporate homepage, actually I will demonstrate. Just TTP. I'm going to use Google, and I've typed in capitals. Google. So we're going to use google.co.uk. That's the default homepage. Now, here you can specify a password, so I'm going to use build me up. Build me up. There we go. So that's the local administrator password, which we'll need later. Click next. Click next. And it will now create a task sequence, and we can then click finish. So we now have our task sequence, we now have our operating system. That is all we need to deploy Windows 10 via a ISO image. So if I right click on deployment share and go to update deployment share, I'm going to select the completely integrate the boot image at the bottom, and we're going to click next. We're going to click next. Now this process again takes a little while. What's happening here is that MDT is stripping down the boot image. It is then recreating the WIM files and then is regenerating the ISO files for you. Once this is done, I will take the ISO file and I will insert it into a virtual machine, and we'll run through the build process. Now you can burn this to DVD. Obviously you need a DVD burner in your server, or you need to copy the ISO image to a computer with a DVD drive. So I will be back shortly. Okay guys, so you can see this has completed its process. So let's just take a look at what it's actually done. If I minimize MDT and I go to my D drive, I go to my deployment share, and if I go to my boot folder, I will find these two Light Touch PE64, Light Touch PE86. Now, these two files here can be used to boot any device from a DVD drive. You can take these and put them on a memory stick and then boot from the memory stick if you so wish. Something I will be looking at in a separate video is how to configure MDT with Windows Deployment Services, which is what these two boot, these two WIM files, so the Light Touch PE x64 WIM and the Light Touch PE86.WIM. Now we'll look at these in a separate video because there are a couple more configuration steps that need to take place place with this. I will be looking at this from the point of view of a Windows environment, so assuming you have your DHCP running on a Windows server. Now, DHCP doesn't have to be run on a Windows server for this to work. It can be run on your router, on some switches have DHCP capabilities, but they do need to have custom DHCP option support. Now, 99% of routers, if not 100% of routers, have this support for DHCP options. There are two options in specific that you need to configure: the boot file name and the boot server. In some cases it's called the TFTP server. Now, we'll look at this in more detail in a separate episode, but if anyone wants me to look at any specific routers, I will of course try and look at how to do it with specific routers and try and walk you through it. I am going to try and look at doing it with a Cisco router, but that's a little way up. That's a couple of weeks away at the minute. But I will be doing this with a Windows server in this current setup that I have here. So I'm going to pause the video while I copy this file off onto another computer so that I can put this into a virtual machine so that you're able to see what happens when you run the installation. I will be back in a second. Okay guys, welcome back. A couple of minutes later, we have virtual machine booting with the video. Now, I haven't changed anything, I haven't done anything else in the background. All I've done is copy the file to my local disk of my computer so that I can run this on a virtual machine. Now, as you can see, the computer, all I've done is inserted the ISO into the virtual machine and I'm allowing it to boot up. Now, automatically it boots up into the deployment toolkit. It's processing the bootstrap settings. And what I've just realised looking at this is that I actually put the skip BDD welcome equals yes in the wrong file. I should have put it in the bootstrap file, but that's not a problem, we'll fix that later. So I'm going to click Run Deployment Wizard to install new operating system. Now, if you haven't set your username and password, or your username and password are wrong, at this point here you'll be prompted for the username and password with a password box. Now, crossed fingers because I've done this right. I will not be prompted with a password box. I will just be shown my task sequences to select. There we go. So I can see I only have my Windows 10 Deploy and my Windows 10 Basic. So if I select that and select Next. Here I'm prompted for the computer name. So let's call this MDT build. We can pre-populate this section here with information for joining a domain, organizational unit, organizational unit, domain join, username, password, domain. But for now, we're going to stick with the standard work group and we're going to click Next. Because I've already set everything to United Kingdom, keyboard layout. We can default all of this, and we can also default the time, which has already been done for us. And we'll click Next. Specify whether to capture an image. We'll look at capturing an image of a device. We'll look at that later. So for now, we'll leave it as do not capture image. We can actually skip the screen by putting in some settings, so we can also look at that. Specify BitLocker. Now we can configure this in the task sequence, or you can configure this by hand. I'm not going to enable BitLocker, but this is where you would set those settings. Again, this screen can be skipped if you so wish. We'll click Next. And here we have a summary of what we're going to be doing. Computer name, etc, etc. So we'll now click begin. Now, I'm not actually going to skip this section, I am going to leave this in, but what I am going to do is I will speed it up because this process can take a little while. In the meantime, I'm going to go get myself a cup of coffee. Okay guys, as you can see, it's just finishing off a little bit. MDT has completed the installation of Windows 10. So once the installation is completed, we've been presented with the Windows 10 desktop. USB device not supported. Now the reason it's just before anybody says the installation wasn't successful, the reason that message just popped up is because I haven't actually included the VMware drivers within this installation. They're not really needed, obviously, to make that message that keeps popping up in the right hand corner to go away. You would include those drivers, which is something that I will include in another video. So just to prove that the name of the computer has been properly set, I really should have given this computer more RAM when I configured it. Oh, stop it, Windows. There we go. Oh, it's open twice now. I'll go down to Control Panel. Where is it? Where is it? Up the top there. Yes, Windows. It has named the computer MDT build. It's joined the work group. Product ID not available. Obviously, we haven't activated Windows on this computer. Now, this is the installation complete. This is Windows deployed to a computer, finished, complete, ready to be used, or ready for you to customize. Go away, driver thing. So, what have we achieved in this video? We've imported an operating system, we've created a task sequence, and we've deployed it to a machine. Now, I'm sure in your environments you've probably got multiple manufacturers of computer. I don't know of an environment where you have one where there is a complete one model of computer or even one particular model of motherboard. I know from my own experience within our environment we have multiple manufacturers, multiple models, whether it be a laptop, a computer, desktop, or a tablet device. We have some that run Windows, we have some that don't. Obviously, MDT won't deploy anything but Windows at the moment. Microsoft may introduce it in the future. Never know. Microsoft is surprising everybody at the minute. But you never can use one set of drivers. It's basically what I'm getting at. You have to be able to support multiple operating systems. Now, some motherboards have the same parts, components on them, so one set of drivers for maybe a network card might do the job, but chipset drivers will be different on manufacturers. One of the brands we use, we have one particular model of computer. I know that within that model of computer, just because we have different batches, there are slightly different drivers, and we have to include those different driver types within our deployment. Otherwise, deployment either doesn't work, or the operating system afterwards doesn't recognize certain components, which is obviously a problem. So I will do another video on importing drivers. As you can see on the screen, the Microsoft deployment task sequence is now just gathering the last bits of information to make sure that task sequence completed successfully. We'll give it a couple of seconds. Now, I would have expected this slightly quicker than this, but it's taken its time. Again, this is more to do with the fact that the computer, the virtual machine that I deployed this to, only has, as we can see from behind, if I just move that down. It only has 2 gig of RAM, and I am trying to deploy a 64-bit operating system. It is using an Intel Core i7 processor. And where is it? There it is. It's popped up over there, but it's hidden. So here you go. Once the deployment task sequence is completed, it's completed successfully. You will see this operating system deployment. Completed successfully. Now, nothing in that box. If there had been an error, there were warnings, etc., you would get a slightly different screen. I may do a task sequence later on which actually deliberately fails, so you can see what those task sequences look like. MDT gives you lots of information. One of the things we will do is we will enable dynamic logging so that we are able to see what's going on and what's happening with the deployments. And you can actually see that live as it's being deployed. So if you've set off a couple of computers and you've gone away and sat back at your desk, you can check up on their status if you so wish. Go away. So that's it for this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Obviously, if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in my next video.